Good morning. My name is Amado Hidalgo. I've been in Dropbox for 6 years, and in this time, I've led the EMEA professional services team, and I've also worked in customer success as a senior technical architect, where I was involved in several data migration projects. I now lead the scale channel solutions in EMEA. I'm here today to give you some tips and some ideas to accelerate your customer's journey to the cloud. Today, I'm going to be covering a few topics. First, I'm going to give you an overview of the challenges of legacy infrastructure and the benefits of moving your customers' data to the cloud. I'm going to introduce 3 steps to achieve a successful file replacement and digital transformation for your customers. I will present the new data migration add-on offering from Dropbox, and I will give you some ideas on how you can generate additional revenue by offering data migration services to your customers. We will have some time at the end for questions. Please submit them via the Zoom interface, and my colleague will be collecting them to be answered at the end. As you heard, we're recording the webinar, and it's going to be available for download later. The next stage of cloud strategies in businesses is definitely a key topic for CIOs and business owners. The cloud has enabled and will continue to enable the adaptability to the current ways of working. More flexible working practices, especially remote working, have given the cloud a real boost. The culture change is here, and it's very real. CIOs are reporting productivity increases, savings on travel budgets, and reduced stress, as workers no longer have to suffer the misery of traffic jams, airport security, etc. Remote working and cloud adoption, and therefore replacing legacy on-premise file servers, will become the new way of working. And this has been accelerated in 2020. You could say that 2020 has actually demonstrated that cloud-based working really works. But there are, of course, some downsides to the new remote working trend. An IDG study found that the average enterprise now has more than 347 terabytes of data. But this data is rarely in one place, on one server, or even on one cloud. So it's no surprise that poor data management is costing businesses an estimated $1.3 billion per year. The challenges with this scattered data and this legacy infrastructure or content on multiple clouds are very clear. As more and more employees work from home or remotely, they need to access the data no matter where they are, on what device, or even when. And this has to be done in a seamless manner. They cannot be wasting time and losing focus trying to find the information they need to do their jobs. So today here, I'm going to share our experience helping a multitude of organizations move from this complex scattered environment to Dropbox. Let me start by stating something that might be obvious for some of you, but it's still important to consider when you're planning this move. You're not just going to move some terabytes from A to B. You're actually going to help people adopt these new ways of working. And a data migration is not just the migration of data, as I say there. It's actually a professional services project. And as such, it requires careful planning, understanding clients' requirements, manage the change carefully, communicate regularly and often with stakeholders, train the end users, etc. But what this means for you as a services partner is an additional source of services revenue. Let me start by introducing some key steps in a data migration project. Step 1, discovery. This is the most critical, regardless of the size of your customer, business, or their infrastructure. In this phase, you must understand your customer needs, the challenges they're facing in the environment, and the employees. You must evaluate the workflows and reach a clear mapping of those key processes. Understand the technology requirements, for example, integrations, any other cloud technologies they use, on-premise tech, etc. Only then can you start to build a case for how the move to the cloud might enable that business. And this is even more important today, considering the change on the ways that we're working. We have seen companies struggle to reach their files and work on their daily tasks as they try to connect with great difficulty to the VPNs. So to gain this understanding, ask your customers these questions. What are the objectives of this file server replacement, of this move? What will it enable the employees to do in their role? Will it save the business money? What are the key use cases? Are they documented already? And if so, how long is it going to take? And how much time are we going to save? What is the existing IT ecosystem? What are the most important business applications that the customer is working with? For example, Adobe or CRMs or anything like that. So having integrations with these other tools will really boost the productivity of the employees. So how is the new cloud solution going to integrate with those? And in essence, really, how will the solution deliver value? Once you've identified the business need for a file server replacement, then you need to select the migration strategy thoughtfully. There are dangers that can damage an implementation. Sure, you're familiar with them. But this can include anything from timeline misalignments all the way to procurement issues. And the impact of not getting this right is definitely business downtime and unhappy customers. So you need to assess the scale of the data migration operation, decide how you will safely and securely migrate your customers' data, and more importantly, calculate a return on investment and ROI that your customer would expect to see post-migration. Without this step, you will really struggle to get stakeholder buy-in and prove the success and the business impact of this file server replacement. So to help you really select the most adequate strategy, ask your customer and ask yourself these questions. So how much data is going to be moved? What is the source? Is it Windows file servers? Are the NAS or the clouds? Is it backup data? Is it just raw data actually? Or do we need to move the permissions too? Who needs to have access to the data and how will it be shared? Does the data itself need to be remodeled, or does the existing sharing model is going to work in the new solution? How are you going to measure success? Do you need specialized, dedicated migration software, or just a simple file importer going to be enough? Are there sufficient resources, both human and financial, to support the migration? And this will help you answer what professional services are going to be needed to support and execute the migration. So with this information and with these answers, you'll be able to select a proper data migration approach. You can create a business case, you can identify stakeholders, agree on timelines and expectations, you can assemble a migration team and start working on a draft plan. You can prepare draft communications and a training plan as well. You need to do a technical analysis. So how much data they have, the type of content, the sharing permissions, the locations, the bandwidth, etc. And only then you can start selecting a migration tool. You can think, are we going to move the data manually? Are you going to use a simple dedicated, simple file importer, like pure file transfer from A to B? Or are you going to use a dedicated migration tool to have a complete and seamless migration? So once you have identified the business case and the objectives of the migration, it is really important that you prove that the migration will actually work and that those objectives that you defined earlier with the customer are going to be met. At this stage, you need to execute your migration strategy, organizing your cloud solution and establishing the right frameworks and integrations, for example, with Active Directory or single sign-on, as well as security protocols, two-factor authentication, for example. You also need to define sharing policies and other policies that will apply in the new system. All of this is going to be fundamental for success. So how would a typical project plan might look like? Now, this is standard project planning methodology, nothing fancy. I'm not going to teach you how to run a project. I just want to really touch on a couple of points here. Already explained the discovery phase. When you create a business case, find and discuss with the key stakeholders, do all the technical analysis, etc. But I'm going to look into the actual build and pilot phase. We recommend a pilot. Essentially, validate your hypothesis with either a pre-migration simulation or with a pilot. Here you will be testing a small part of the migration, for example, a department, a location, or a group of users. And you need to confirm that this plan that you have drafted meets your objectives. Also, you will be learning from that pilot and apply those learnings to the actual final migration. But make sure that your pilot includes data transfer, of course, but also communications, user experience, training. Try to cover as much as possible during that smaller pilot phase. So how long is this going to take? Well, a migration can take anything from a few days to several months and really depends on many factors. The source, the volume, how much data do you have to move, how many users, how complex is the permission structure, what bandwidth the customer has on their on-premise environment. So this that I'm showing here is just a very high-level plan for a migration, a small migration, I would say, maybe a couple of terabytes, a few tens of users. Now, for a medium-sized migration, let's say a few tens of terabytes or a couple of hundred users, you could replace the word days with weeks. But even for more complex projects where hundreds of terabytes or thousands of users, you'll be looking at months here. Of course, this is super high level. You need to go in a lot more detail. But the key thing to understand here is what has to happen before, during, and actually after the copy of the data itself. Okay, so who does what? Typically you, the partner, will drive and own most of the project in consultation with the customer, of course, and at times even with the tool vendor and with us in Dropbox or other source vendors that you're migrating from, Microsoft, NAS vendors, etc. During the pre-migration phase, you, the partner, would work very closely with the customer, as I said earlier, to validate this advice provided and tweak the migration approach. During the migration phase, you work with a tool vendor to set up the environment and provision it, handle any exceptions, etc. You might also consult with us in Dropbox or with the source vendor, things like support or exceptions or API rating and so on. And during the post-migration, again, you get very involved in driving the project and working again with the customer to validate the integrity of the data and the permissions. You may also at this point provide training for end users and migration complete type of communication. Right, so we talk about the project. Let me talk to you now about what the new data migration add-on from Dropbox is, powered by Cloud FastPath. It is an add-on that you can buy on top of the Dropbox business licenses, and essentially will help you seamlessly migrate your customers' data to Dropbox. You'll get a powerful data migration tool, Cloud FastPath. You get access to data migration support. Let's look into this into a little bit more detail. So the data migration, the Dropbox data migration add-on is a powerful cloud-based migration tool. It will help you centrally manage and deliver both on-premise to Dropbox and cloud to Dropbox migrations. As powerful pre-migration analysis to avoid any nasty surprises down the line. You can do permissions and ownership mappings to make sure that the right people have access to the data and only them. You have fast data transfers with API optimization. I will explain that in a minute. And you get a migration report and a validation to ensure that the customer data has in fact been correctly moved to Dropbox. And of course, as I said, you get access to support, both from Dropbox, our support team, as well as from Cloud FastPath. Let's dig a little bit deeper into some of these tool capabilities. The Dropbox data migration add-on is a solid, full feature and well-supported tool. So you can migrate your customers to Dropbox as quickly and as safely as possible. You can automate the migrations to expedite and help you expedite the move of your customers to the cloud and minimize the downtime. You get one optimization. What this means is you can set up multiple points of presence or POPs close to where the data is. You can do parallel loading. Essentially, you can run multiple migration jobs at the same time. You have Dropbox API call optimization. Cloud FastPath is using the right API batch upload calls and also has their tool workflows have been optimized and fine-tuned in collaboration with Dropbox engineering. You can streamline these cloud-to-cloud migrations as well, not just from on-premise. But from cloud to cloud, what it means is the data doesn't have to be downloaded locally to the customer's environment from one cloud and then re-uploaded to Dropbox. This is done regionally this done through regional points of presence that are already on the cloud. You can preserve user and group permissions, and this ensures that only the people who need access to the data do, no more, no less. You can automatically map permissions, ownership, directory structure, and this will simplify the post-migration work for you. You can transfer the right levels of access and the file structure to Dropbox, and this ensures data governance. And what you also get is very robust built-in analytics. So you know what the migration is going to look like. This really is one of the key or unique selling points of Cloud FastPath, because without a proper analysis, it's really difficult to scope the data migration project, and therefore the nature and the cost of the service that you will be offering. With pre-migration content audits, you can analyze the actual content both from file server and other cloud sources, so you know exactly how much data the customer has, and you can right-size that job. You don't get any nasty surprises down the line that you thought they had 10 terabytes and it turns out they have 15. You can also analyze permissions for both file servers and cloud sources, so you know who owns what files and folders. You get powerful visualization, so you can analyze and break down the data based on file age, type, size, owner, and much more. You can assess the migration speed before you start the migration, so again, no nasty surprises down the line. Once you start the migrations, you can monitor those file transfers in real time, so you don't find out that something has gone wrong when it's too late. And with post-migration insights, you can then view the reports in the tool itself or export them to Tableau, Power BI, whatever you use to validate the success of this migration. So you can compare the source and the destination, navigate through the Dropbox environment as you were actually logged in. Essentially, what all this gives you is peace of mind. So the Dropbox data migration add-on supports many sources to migrate data from. This allows you to perform file server on-premise to Dropbox migrations, so file servers, NAS, SANs. This helps you remove legacy hardware, consolidate NAS platforms, and helps your customers realize these cost savings. So by decommissioning your hardware, eliminate backup and disaster recovery costs. But very importantly today, actually, to facilitate access to remote workforce who no longer need to really VPN into the local infrastructure. But it also allows for cloud-to-cloud migrations or cloud-to-Dropbox migrations. You can consolidate multiple cloud platforms to increase governance, reduce shadow IT, simplify management, reduce data sprawl. Yes, I was reading recently that 57% of the workforce work on multiple locations in a week. And also typical enterprise has more than 14 or uses more than 14 clouds. So examples, think of a HR employee who is saving confidential files to a shared network drive that can be accessed by anyone in their organization. Or or a company who's paying for unused accounts from a CRM tool when the sales department has switched on to Salesforce. So you can also then migrate from less used platforms and consolidate and realize these cost savings, things like ShareFile or Ignite. And this helps you realize those cost savings, or help your customer, I should say. This helps avoid paying for duplicate solutions, reduce the cost of these object storage platforms that you see there on the right-hand side. As you know, Dropbox does not charge for uploads or downloads of the data, but other platforms actually do. So, okay, by now, you know what the Dropbox data migration add-on and what it can do for you. But so what? You as a services partner, why should you care? You certainly have a lot of other options to get your customers' data into the cloud. What's so special about this? But moving your customers to the cloud gives you retention, adoption, and additional revenue. Let's look into this in a moment. So retention. This enables you to provide data migration options to customers, and this drives customer stickiness. We've seen renewal rates of over 96% for customers that do a data migration early in the deployment project. Number two, adoption. You get a solid, full-feature, well-supported tool to help you migrate content to Dropbox quickly and safely. And this drives cloud adoption and even future use and expansion. And third, professional services revenue. You can build additional capabilities to offer migrations as a service or as a solution. Let me show you a couple of examples of how or what you could be offering to your customers. So there are potential services, and this is by no means exhaustive list, but you could be building around a data migration offering. So service could be advisory only, essentially read only, where the bulk of the project of the work is done by the customer. Or you could have execution type services where you, the partner, is actually taking the driving seat in the project. Let's look at the advisory services first. And there are potential services along the three migration phases that I mentioned. So you can dip in and out of a migration project as customers get more or less involved. In the pre-migration phase, you could, as an expert in the topic, you could, for example, discuss what the goals of this migration are. You could be offering best practice advice. You can really help the customer select the best migration approach and the methods. You could help them by doing a pre-migration analysis, even using a tool that really shows the customer how much data they have. You can then offer services like permissions mapping best practice, essentially explain the source operates this way, the destination Dropbox operates that way, this is how we advise you to recreate or reassign the permissions, and so on. During the migration itself, even if the customer is driving the project, you can still provide this guidance and support to help the customer. You can help them simulate the migration. You can help them plan the pilot. You can really make sure that both the source is ready to move the data from and the target or Dropbox is ready to receive that data. And then finally, during the post-migration phase, you can continue to provide this additional level of reporting and guidance and support. You can also get involved with designing the change management or even the end user communications. So these are services that are advisory. So you're there providing best practice advice. But you can also provide execution services, basically pushing the buttons where you, the partner, takes the driving wheel of the project. Again, you can include services along the three migration phases, depending really on how much the customer might want to get involved. In the pre-migration phase, for example, you can offer technical readiness analysis, which can evaluate the current and the future data types, the user folders, the network shares, the bandwidth. You can design and prepare to execute this change management and end user communications. In the migration phase, really, you can manage the customer source system to extract the data from. You can, of course, manage the customer's cloud fastpath instance where you can set up and configure the points of presence. You can set up the migration jobs. You can prepare and segment these migration wave strategies, simulate the migration, super important, and actually execute those jobs. You can also manage the customer's Dropbox system, where you can invite users, onboard them, as well as, of course, doing the folder mapping and assigning permissions. And finally, after the migration of the data is complete, you can continue to manage the Dropbox system by adding additional users or creating additional team folders and so on. You can then provide any specific deliverables that the customer may have requested during the earlier phases. If you have multiple migrations or the customer is thinking of adding additional data into Dropbox in the future, you can continue to support the cloud fastpath environment. For example, doing these Delta migrations if the end users have to work in the data throughout the migration. You can train the end users and maybe even the admins. And you can deliver this change management and end user experience. This we call migration complete communications. So these are only a few examples. Just think, which professional services do you currently offer and how could you adapt them to offer data migration? So just to finish the presentation and to help you and your customers start your journeys to the cloud and replacing their file servers, please make sure that Number one, you log into the partner portal. That is on portal.dropboxpartners.com. That's portal.dropboxpartners.com. And there you will find training and key resources to get you on the way. Number two, contact your local distributor to get the pricing information and any commercial information you may need. Number three, get in touch with us. We love to hear feedback, and we love to hear from you directly. So email us on partners@dropbox.com. That's partners@dropbox.com. So thank you. It's been a pleasure being here today. Thank you for your attendance and your interest. And let's have a look at some questions that came in throughout the chat.
Hello, Maro. Aptar here.
Hey, Aptar.
We have a few questions come through. The first one is from Nick, and it is the migration tool add-on a one-off or an ongoing cost?
That's a really good question. I would encourage that you contact your local distributor. Typically, a migration is a one-off, but as I said at the end, you may have these delta migrations. So it is currently priced as a one-off. There's no recurring cost because migration typically happen at the beginning of a project. But if you need to use the tool for delta migrations, you can continue to use it. Right now, the pricing model is on a per terabyte of usage. Is not time constrained. Thank you. Great question.
Great, thank you. And the next one is from Katrin, and will this new data migration add-on support Microsoft SharePoint Online migration to Dropbox?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. And lastly, in your opinion, which migration phase is the most risky one, where things go wrong the most?
That's a great question. You need to define risk, and the more you plan, the less risky any project will be. So for me, the pre-migration or discovery phase is really the key phase, where you're actually working very closely with the customer to understand what their needs are, and also set the expectations. The data that they had in the file servers may not look exactly the same when it comes to Dropbox, but they will need to understand that the data is going to be in Dropbox. It may look different. It may be organized in a different way. So this first phase is critical. In terms of risk, like anything, if you manage that risk properly, the actual migration of the data itself, which I'd say most people would think that is a risky part, it actually is not that complicated. And it's specifically the Cloud FastPath tool with all these pre-migration analysis, simulations, validations, it really reduces the risk massively. Thank you for the question. That's great. Do you have time for one more, or are we okay? Or
we do. And the other one is from Nick, and that is, are you able to cover more on how large design files will be handled? Currently, he's working with 3 test files of around 800 megabytes each.
Okay. You mean in terms of the actual migration of those files? I'm not sure exactly what I mean by handling large files.
I believe so, yes.
So essentially, if you're migrating from a file server, it really depends on the bandwidth that you have. In Dropbox itself, we handle files in chunks of 4 megabytes, but that's once the data is in Dropbox. To migrate data from file servers to Dropbox, the tool Cloud FastPath uses one optimization, so you can actually schedule to do that migration after hours and don't use the bandwidth that much. The files themselves will need to be migrated, just an upload to the cloud. I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to send us an email. I'll be more than happy to discuss that in more detail. There's a question here around, we have a PowerPoint of this presentation to show our team. Yes, this is going to be recorded, and you will get the information after that. So just a question, can we test the migration tool? For sure, just contact partners@dropbox.com or access through the portal, and you'll be able to get more information and access to the tool itself. Okay, I think we're kind of out of time after. I don't think there's anything else in there.
No, that's great for now. Thank you.
Okay, well, I said again, thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day and your migration to the cloud. Take care. Bye-bye.